Welcome to VCR, Vintage Cinema Rewind. We're bringing old movies to new viewers. I'm Blake.
And I forgot you had a bidet.
Is that from this movie?
No, that's just from me. I just used your bathroom before we got started, and I was like, oh, yeah, nice.
We don't have a bidet.
Oh. I may need to check on something before I leave. Okay.
Wow, what an intro.
What an intro.
We're
Idiosyncratic, just like this movie we're talking about, Raising Arizona.
Yes, Raising Arizona, a movie from the 80s. It's a Coen Brothers film, one of their earlier movies in their filmography. It's a movie that I've been aware of for a long time because I'm a massive Coen Brothers fan, as are you, I think?
Yeah. So, well, certainly. I mean, kind of. Like, I've enjoyed all their movies. Like, we did The Big Lebowski earlier this year.
And that's one of your top 4 favorite movies.
Yeah, top 3, actually. And then I also really like, No Country for Old Men and Fargo. But to be honest, those are kind of the only 3 I have actually seen. I did see True Grit in theaters in 2010, but I only saw it the one time. So what usually happens with this podcast, like, one day I was just at home, like face down in a puddle of my own saliva, and my phone dinged, and it was you. And you were just like, we're doing a crime next. And you sent me a list of options, and I like squinted at the screen, and my eyes landed on Raising Arizona. I'm like, I've heard of this movie. Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
Right? And then I think I texted you a few days ago just being like, I don't know anything about this movie. All I know is that Nicolas Cage is in it. And you were like, it's a Coen Brothers movie. I'm like, oh, it is.
Yep.
Great. Okay.
And usually when you say you go into movies blind and maybe they're pre-selected slightly by me, they end up usually
it's a curated collection. Yeah.
that you usually enjoy them more when you go into them blind.
Yeah, when I go in knowing absolutely nothing.
And how do you find with this one?
Cards on the table. I really enjoyed this movie.
Yes.
I enjoyed it a lot. I watched it with my friend Mike.
Yep.
Mike with hair, not bald Mike, who I'm living with.
Also known as Magic Mike.
Also known as Magic Mike, which makes me Mike Prime, the original. But no, we both had a really, really good time. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, genuinely a good time with this one. Kind of a comedy, kind of a crime. Well, mostly a comedy, kind of a crime.
This movie, and like I'm sure other people pointed this out, this is almost like a cartoon brought to life.
Yes.
Like this movie is like made of rubber.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's so good.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
So funny. Like it's hard to make me laugh genuinely, but like I was roaring watching this movie.
Yes, that's a great way to put it because I agree. I was going to say that even like in our primer episode here, there were several points in this movie where I was legitimately roaring in my seat laughing.
Yeah, like falling out of chair.
Yes.
Funny. Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Should we go into a plot summary?
Yeah, for sure. Let's get into it.
So Nicolas Cage plays Herbert McDonough.
Or
High, a small-time offender. And when I say small-time offender, I mean like really small. He's basically like a career convenience store robber.
Yeah.
Like he essentially lives in prison, right? He does time in like the state penitentiary, gets out, and then just comes right back in. There's a scene in like the really excellent prologue where he's talking to his parole board. They're like, we got a word for you, Hyde. Recidivism. Repeat offender. And yeah, no, he's just kind of this...
He's just trapped in his situation.
Kind of like a lot of people probably in that kind of socioeconomic class and in that time in history. He just doesn't really have anything else going on, right? At least he doesn't until he falls in love with the pretty female cop who keeps taking his mugshot.
Yes.
A lady named Ed. And they end up inexplicably getting married. And they want to start a family together, only for it to turn out that Ed's insides are a rocky place from which Hyde's seed can find no purchase.
The direct quote from the movie.
Yeah,
actually.
right. I'm not a sociopath. I'm quoting the movie. And this really bums the two of them out. While this is going on, there's a local celebrity named Nathan Arizona who's like the king of unpainted furniture in Arizona. And him and his wife have quintuplets.
Yes.
5 identical babies. And in the newspaper article, his wife makes a comment about, we have too many babies, essentially.
Yep.
So then Ed, in her despair, decides that they're just going to steal one of the babies and raise it as their own.
Yeah.
I.e. Raising Arizona.
Right.
And things kind of spin off and dovetail from there.
Yeah, and we talked about this like right before we started recording, that basically we just need to talk about like the opening prologue, because that in a nutshell, like all of that is kind of just outlined in the prologue. Like,
Yeah.
we just hit the ground running. This movie goes at like such a fast pace in that opening 15-minute crawl.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, here's all the characters, here's the whole setup of this, here's the premise.
Here's the premise. Yeah. Go for it. Like,
Yeah.
him and Ed only have like really 3 short scenes together, and then he proposes to her.
Yeah.
Best proposal I've ever seen. He gets released from prison. He walks into her office while she's taking someone's mugshot, and he just goes, I'm a free man, and I'm proposing. And then he looks to the criminal getting his photo taken. He's like, hi, Kirk. And the guy with handcuffs just like, hey.
Yeah.
Like,
It's really great, like how it just sets up everything so quickly.
I know, right? This has got to be one of like the funniest and most efficient like opening 10-15 minutes
Yes.
in a movie.
Hyper
right?
efficient.
Yeah, right? And like, it's funny, when we meet Ed, the female cop that he falls in love with, it's like, again, they probably only have like a minute and a half of screen time, but there's something, you kind of buy it in a weird way. It's funny. So the first time she takes his photo, he's just like, oh, you're pretty as a desert flower.
Yeah.
And then when he comes back, presumably months later after being arrested again, she's crying because her fiance ran off with a cosmetology student. And Nicolas Cage gets so mad. He's like, you could tell your husband that I think he's a damn fool, and he could find me here at like the Men's State Penitentiary, Unit 32.
Yeah. Yeah, and because this movie came out in 1987, it's so early on in Nicolas Cage's career that I think that you kind of forget how charismatic Nicolas Cage can be.
I was going to say, like, I've never been a huge Nicolas Cage fan. I know he became a meme for a while.
Right.
But now apparently he's come back. Like, he was just in Longlegs recently.
Yep.
Like, I've never really... What was that movie that recently? The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent? I liked it. I wasn't blown away by it.
I liked it as well. I was like, this isn't more than a 7 out of 10 for me, but I liked it.
Yeah, it was fun. It passed the time, right?
Yep.
This might be the first time I actually looked at Nicolas Cage and was like, oh, this guy can act.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he can really act. And I think he was only 22 in this movie.
Yeah, I believe that. He's so young in this. And I think that's honestly, in that prologue, what carries and sells the relationship is just how charismatic he is. Like, you believe that Ed would fall for this guy, even in these brief, like...
These little flashes.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. I think the opening shot of the movie is like him literally being shoved onto frame. But
Right.
he's just like, my name is Hi McDougal. And
Yeah.
he's getting his photo taken.
Yeah.
You're just like, all right, there he is.
Yeah, it's great. And like with all of this setup and all of these characters that set up, and then with the robbery of the kid is like the whole focal point of the rest of the movie, right?
Yeah,
and then it's
basically.
Like also kind of, goes into their past and how their past kind of intertwine up to this moment.
So like they try to adopt, but because he has a checkered past and a criminal record, he can't, right?
Right. So yeah, so talking about the other people who are involved in this one, obviously Nicolas Cage, who big name, we've talked about him being in
Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent.
Yes.
Yeah. Nicolas freaking Cage, baby.
He was also in Pig recently, which a lot of people consider like one of the best movies of the 2020s. I liked it a lot, but I wouldn't put it in my top 10 or even top 20 of the 2020s so far.
And I could be wrong. I was just explaining to you earlier that you're my anchor to reality.
Yep.
And that left to my own devices, I'm basically just a bat flying around a cave. More on that later. But anyways, I feel like Nicolas Cage has this trajectory now where like he does shitty low budget movies for a paycheck, but then every now and then he does real movies and shows that he can actually really act when he wants to.
I think it's kind of come full circle, right? Like he's got such a weird career in that like in the 80s and 90s he was like an A-lister.
Yeah, he won an Oscar and everything.
Yeah. And then I think he got in some financial troubles in like the 2000s and he was just taking on movies for paychecks to kind of clear that up because I think he kind of lived a pretty lavish lifestyle.
I mean, then they even kind of make fun of that in The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, right?
Exactly.
So...
And then things kind of come full circle. I think he got out of his debt and stuff, and then he started like picking some really interesting movies, and kind of his career's kind of come full circle and again where he's put out some like
bangers.
Yeah, like or movies that people are genuinely interested in going and seeing.
Yeah, for sure.
So he's such an enigma. But anyway, the other characters and people in this, Holly Hunter playing Ed.
Me and Mike with hair watched this movie, and we were both kind of like, who is that?
Right.
Like, who is that person? Like, we've seen her before. Who is that?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until the credits rolled that I pulled up my phone. I'm like, oh, that's Holly Hunter.
Yeah.
Like from The Big Sick and
Yep.
Batman vs. Superman, where she got blowed up.
Yeah, and also, like, she's the voice of Mrs. Incredible.
Yeah, I saw that too. So I was like, okay, cool. It's funny. Who are we talking about this recently? Where like when you're used to seeing an actor as an old Gary Oldman.
Yes.
It's surreal when you're used to seeing them as an older, more distinguished person. Then you see them when they're young, and you're like, huh.
I gotta say, like, now that Holly Hunter's performance in this is actually really, really good.
Oh yeah, she's incredible.
She is the emotional heart of the movie, and like I genuinely care about her. And we gotta say as well that this is a movie where the setup is the two main characters, one being an ex-con, steal a child. You know,
so it's important that you like these guys.
It's very, very important that you like these guys.
Well, and like they don't. This movie's a comedy. It's a farce. It's a cartoon. It almost kind of reminded me of The Jerk in some points, right? Mm-hmm. Especially when a certain character on a motorcycle shows up. But like,
yeah, we don't get movies like this anymore. This kind of comedy.
No, definitely not. But again, like, it's not really dwelled on. But like the fact that Ed is infertile and she wants a kid, but she can't have one. Like, you know, we're in our 30s. I think we've started, I know I have at least started meeting people where it's like, oh, like you're having fertility problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, it's hard to relate to, especially because, you know, I'm not even sure I want kids, but like, you know, you kind of sympathize with those people and with this character where it's like, oh, that fucking sucks.
Right.
Right?
Well, yeah, because, you know, in our culture, you're raised to just always expect that you're going to have kids someday, right? And so, like, if that's what you want out of life and life deals you a bad hand and suddenly you're just being told that you can't have that, and they can't even adopt too, right? Like, that's where like the real knife twist is. They clearly don't come from means. So, like, I was actually going to look up, like, what doing the in vitro would cost in the US back in the 80s, but I gotta imagine it's prohibitively expensive in the 80s.
I was just reading what's her name, Anna Marie Tendler's memoir, Men Have Called Her Crazy, where she talks about doing like IV in vitro treatments, and it's thousands and thousands of dollars.
Exactly.
Like it's a lot.
Yeah, so this is like two people who are in like the probably lower class, who are just struggling to get by, who have this whole like expectation for where their lives are going, and they're being shut down at every possible opportunity.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. Like, Ed's dad buys them a starter home, what they call a starter home, and it's just a trailer in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. It's I don't know. There's something about this movie that's a little timeless in that sense, and the way that they sell this character and the way that this character is hinged around Ed and High and Nicolas Cage and Holly Hunter's performances is that I never felt gross about what was happening with them,
even though they're stealing a baby.
Yeah. Like I was surprised because I kind of went into this one kind of generally knowing that was going to be what happened, and I was surprised by like how not dirty it felt.
Yeah, I guess, right.
And also, I think part of it is as well is they've built it in that like they're stealing one of quintuplets, like 5 kids, and you just sit there like, oh my god, like I think I'd be asking someone to take one of these kids off my hands too, right?
Right. Well, it also doesn't hurt that Nathan Arizona, the guy they're stealing from, is kind of a hilarious caricature in his own right.
Yes.
So basically think like kind of a greasy used car salesman, and like you know, he's the king of unpainted furniture in Arizona, and he does these like hilarious TV ads where it's like, if you could find a lower price than my name ain't Nathan Arizona.
Yeah. There's something really great about this movie as well if you're a Coen Brothers fan.
I think, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. I think it also helps that like Ed and High are lower, essentially in poverty.
Yeah.
And Nathan Arizona has 5 kids and he's rich.
Right.
Right? So like you're naturally kind of rooting for them as the underdogs.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, you know, as well, if you're a fan of like the Coen Brothers movies, like stuff like that, where it's like the kind of shady local businessman, that those kind of stuff kind of pop up in their movies quite a bit.
I guess they do, actually, now that you mention it.
Yeah, this movie is really interesting in the sense that it's their second feature film, and a lot of little tropes and scenes and sequences are actually used and repeated throughout like the rest of their filmography.
It's like their sophomore effort, right?
Yeah, exactly.
They're still kind of finding their footing.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that was kind of what caught my interest, especially you bringing up Nathan Sr. kind of reminded me of that. The other characters, like John Goodman makes an appearance in this. Actually, more than an appearance.
Fuck yeah, does he? The scene where he like escapes from prison and just rises screaming from the mud. I was like, what am I? I was like, was this before Silence of the Lambs?
Yeah.
Or not Silence of the Lambs, Shawshank Redemption?
Right.
Right.
No, him playing Gale Snotes and his brother Evel Snotes William Forsythe are fantastic in this and
Oh my God.
ridiculous.
Just brilliant.
Yeah.
It's so funny. The scene where he escapes from prison, he rises screaming from the mud, reaches down and pulls his brother out by his ankle.
Yeah. We'll talk about that in the deep dive for sure.
Yeah.
And then, there's a bunch of other characters like Frances McDormand, who's a regular collaborator and also married to one of the Coen brothers, is in this, and a few other smaller characters.
Everyone is perfect in this movie. This
Yes.
is one of those movies. I think William Goldman said that, like, all it takes to get a movie right is perfect casting. Everyone in this movie is pitch perfect. Like, even the extras and, like, the bit players,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. There's no bad parts in this movie.
No, absolutely not.
So who is this movie for, and does it hold up to a modern watch? Again, I think there's something timeless about this movie in a way, and I was wondering if I was going to felt like it kind of rubbed me the wrong way at all about the stealing the kid or anything. And all of that, I was surprised it effectively kind of quashed my concerns going in.
Yeah, about stealing a baby. Yeah. So, honestly, this movie holds up really well.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny. So, Mike without hair, Magic Mike, he was asking me, like, what are you guys doing? And I said, Raising Arizona. And he lit right up. He's like, oh, Raising Arizona. Like, my grandfather showed me that movie.
Oh,
and
no way.
Blah, 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 blah. So I feel like my canned answer for this question is, if you're interested in movies, you should check it out. But, like, I honestly feel like you could probably put this movie on in front of anyone and they would like it.
I think most people, this is definitely a screwball comedy, and I think that some people are just not going to vibe with the screwball comedy.
Which is funny because we were just talking about how I often do not pass vibe checks both in movies and in real life, but
Right.
I was really eating this movie up.
Yeah, I mean it's a unique vibe, right? Like when we usually talk vibe movies, it's like style over substance, where the style is the focal point.
The
of
style
the film.
is the content.
Yeah. Whereas this is the screwball comedy nature of it. Like some people are just not interested in that type of comedy or in comedy in general kind of thing.
Well, famously, I think Roger Ebert did not like this movie.
Yes.
Yeah, which I take issue with.
This movie's interesting. We'll talk about that more in the deep dive too, because this movie came out to really mixed reception in the 80s.
Right, which, yeah.
This is one of those cult classics,
Everyone was
right?
already on cocaine in the 80s. They were too coked out to appreciate this movie.
But, there's also a little bit jank in this one. I think that there is kind of one area of this movie that maybe could have used a little bit of
You know
extra.
what? This is really fucking funny because normally I'm the asshole on this podcast,
Mm-hmm.
but this is 2 movies we've done in a row where I'm just like, I had a great time, no notes.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm finally lightening up and you're finally darkening.
I don't know. There's just the prologue was great, but I think the first 15 minutes of Act 1 has a little bit of jank to it.
Okay,
But
interesting.
We'll talk about it in the deep dive. That's just the only thing is that I would say, again, I don't often turn off movies. I think I only turn off movies if they're so bad and I'm just so disinterested in them. And oftentimes I don't seek out those movies, and I also do a bit of research before I watch a movie, so I kind of know what I'm going into usually.
Right.
And otherwise, maybe sometimes occasionally I'll turn off a movie because it's just not the vibe that I'm looking for when I get started on it.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, I think that that's just the one thing to know is that for me personally, I think this movie is really, really, really funny. It's just I thought there was a little bit of jank in that the first act after the prologue.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would also say that this is borderline a Western.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, the Coen brothers love their fucking Westerns, especially when you look at their whole oeuvre or whatever the word is.
Right.
Like, they really,
Yeah.
they like the West.
Yeah, they definitely do, and a lot of their films are kind of stylized like that. And I would say even the last act of the film is really heavily a Western. But it's kind of neat seeing a screwball comedy set in a Western.
I mean, and I think one of the real highlights of this movie is the setting.
Yes.
Because it's in rural Arizona.
Mhm.
And this word gets thrown around a lot in the movie itself. There's a lot of just hay seeds,
Yeah.
real salt of the earth types.
Yeah.
Even High himself, he's just kind of this, I don't think he's stupid, but he's a real kind of
Mm-hmm.
man child, probably no prospects, no education.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And there's a lot of people like that orbiting around him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he's even I would say he's a chaotic good person. There's goodness to him. It's just he's kind of lost. He's fallen through the cracks.
He really likes robbing convenience stores, right? And
But I think that's a symptom though, right?
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny though, they do make a point of being every time he does that, they always make a point of saying that the gun wasn't loaded.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So, a lot to say about that.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in the deep dive for sure. Your one scene to sell movie. Where are you going?
So, I didn't like any of the clips on movie clips.
Fair enough. Yeah,
so I found one. It's called Clinical Vignette Raising Arizona Infertility by Motorsports Research A something.
You don't have to say that much. I'm going to put that in the description. So
okay, well,
the link will be in the description.
This is more for your benefit. And it's just like a really quick scene, and it's one of the clips from the prologue. It shows like Ed realizing that she's barren and them trying to adopt and not being able to adopt. And I really liked it because it sort of encapsulates the whole central conflict of the movie.
Right.
And it takes place during the truly excellent prologue.
Yes.
You know what I think I've learned from doing this podcast this year? Is that you really need to nail the opening 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Because like movies like Gladiator or Silence of the Lambs and all that stuff. Like it's almost like, there's a quote with novel writing where it's like your first chapter will sell your book.
Right. Well, I would even say that with Goodfellas. I've said it before in the past where everybody remembers, like, for as long as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
Gangster, yeah.
But nobody remembers Henry Hill going to jail at the end, right? Like,
no.
and all that stuff and, like, going into witness protection. But it's like, it's the first 20 minutes that make that movie legendary, in my opinion.
Fucking iconic, right?
Yeah.
So, anyways, I picked that because that really got to the heart of the movie.
Nice.
The movie clips channel for this is so weird. It's only 5 clips, and they're all a very random assortment of clips from the movie.
Yeah, I will say I did kind of stick to it, and I did pick one of them. The one that I chose was Picking Up Diapers, which is, in my opinion, one of the 2 funniest scenes in the entire movie.
Oh, dear God, yes.
The nice thing about this clip as well, because it's post-high robbing a convenience store, and it actually only does maybe half or a third of the actual full scene in which it's kind of encapsulating. But that scene is just so laugh out loud funny.
And it's so preposterous.
Yes.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, it's just insane because there's so many things kind of all converging at once. And some of them are just like pop into that scene and then kind of never get referenced again. And it's just wild and crazy and fun.
Like, yeah, it's the screwiest of the screwball comedy moment, right? Yeah.
And also the score in that is like probably where the high point of the score is when there's that yodeling banjo song.
Yeah, right. I'm surprised that hasn't become a meme. Like just hoo-wee.
Yeah.
He's being shot at.
Yeah.
Being shot at, chased by stray dogs.
Yeah.
Like
it's fantastic. It's genuinely like probably the hardest I've laughed this year in a movie.
I know, right? And it's funny, like I feel like that's at the halfway point in the movie, and they were just sometimes when you get to the halfway point, like the middles of stories are really hard, so they just went, screw it, let's just go balls to the wall with this one.
That's such a good way to put it, and it's pretty accurate too. That's such a banger of a scene,
Ooh-wee.
and you only
yeah,
and you only have to experience like a third of it in the one scene to sell the movie. So if it at all interests you, just let me tell you that the scene even gets better from where it starts at.
This almost kind of reminds you of The Princess Bride.
Yes.
In a weird way, like just tone and vibe wise.
Yeah.
This in The Princess Bride should be lumped together. Okay, if you're depressed.
Yeah.
This is Dr. Michael chiming in. Put on The Princess Bride, then watch this movie.
I would say put on this first and then The Princess Bride, because, I mean, Princess Bride is like a stone cold one of the greatest movies of all time, whereas I really, really like this movie a lot, but I wouldn't call it like in my top 100 by any means or anything like that.
You know what? No. Here's what I'll say. Get 2 monitors and play both movies at the same time.
Just play the yodeling song on repeat.
Yeah, and then play a third movie and put Silence of the Lambs on, because you don't want to be too happy that you're delirious.
That is a psycho's recommendation of movie lists.
Well, Blake, I just described myself as a bat floating around in a cave. What did you think I was going to say?
True. When to watch? I mean, this is a late night Friday movie for me. Like, this is the second act.
I feel like this would be a great date movie, actually. Watch it with your partner or like on like
yes.
Yeah.
Long-term partner. I wouldn't call it like date night, first date or second date kind of thing.
I'm going to try to convince someone to watch this movie with me in the next couple weeks, and I'll let you know how it goes.
Okay, sounds good. It's dealing heavily with like parenthood and stuff like that, and I guess some of the anxieties of parenthood as well. I think that's actually the core theme of the movie, is especially as a father, like the anxieties of a father, essentially.
Yeah, that does seep into things, doesn't it?
It's an interesting movie to show somebody like on a first date.
Well, Blake, I'll let you know how it goes.
Okay,
Maybe this
sounds
will
good.
be a third or fourth date.
Yeah, I think that's a little more appropriate.
Hoo-wee.
It's so catchy.
I know,
I was singing
right?
it after I watched the movie for like 20 minutes. So
Hoo-wee. Yeah, I'm gonna put it when I get some writing done tomorrow morning. I'm gonna put it on.
where to watch right now? It is streaming on a few places, but they're a little bit more niche, like Hoopla, the Criterion Channel, Hollywood Suite. So I actually ended up renting this one on YouTube, which I'm sure you did as well.
I actually rented it on Prime.
Oh,
Yeah.
how was your Prime experience?
It was pretty good.
Nice. Yeah,
It was Prime.
it was good on YouTube too. And I think that is it for the primer episode. I think that you and I probably hyped this one up quite a bit, but it kind of deserves it.
It absolutely deserves it.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's quite like a lost gem, but it's maybe slightly overlooked film.
I think this will probably make it onto my top 5 of this year.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
That being said, I hope you go and check this one out, and I hope you come back next week for the deep dive of Raising Arizona.
Hoo-wee.
Wee-hoo! Wow. All right, see you next time.
Bye.